those are just starting, and the treatment seems to be working.
It's 1978.
Yeah.
Is it
Parkinson's?
He has stage 4 prostate that has gotten in the bone.
They didn't have to catch
It's
her.
considered terminal, but it's not like a death sentence. Like,
The only one in the.
way.
It will,
It
did
can be
you have a
years,
PowerPoint
you
going
know,
on in
which is
that
what I'm
cabinet?
hoping.
PowerPoint?
Did you? Oh, yeah.
Just kidding.
Y'all
have a
just
PowerPoint?
qualified for Kona,
Do you have a PowerPoint?
and then the pandemic hit. We did Arizona together in 2019, pandemic
I
hit.
could not catch.
And then he kept trying to do
Yeah, when that
Kona.
guy swung that
and then
bat,
ended
my
up
eyes went
moving it to
shut.
St. George, Utah.
It's an
And it's like,
unnatural
then when he was
experience.
ready to do that, then the diagnosis came in. But he does have another
DH second game,
dementia
I said,
too.
I'm catching. I hate it.
He's had that
Good.
diagnosis for a while.
Come off that bench and. I didn't know that.
ready?
Good guy.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order. It's April 18th, 2023, and this is the meeting of the Bowling Springs Planning and Adjustment Board. First item is to allow any comment from anyone that's here in the audience, and I'll just, so everybody's aware, with the following agenda items for the rezoning and the text amendment too, I think we can provide time at that for those items as well. So this would be a time for any citizen comment. Here none. The next item would be consideration by the board of the minutes for the February meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those?
Move to be approved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Here none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Oh,
No.
oh, we gotta vote. Oh,
Got that.
vote on your thing.
Oh.
See how you do.
Always forget that.
Top corner. You have to use your little touchpad there. Oh, yeah.
This is not for me.
Hit refresh.
Everybody got that? Looks like it. Motion passes. I have to be reminded of that every time. All right, so our next item is a request to rezone property at 204 and 206 West College. Petitioners Catherine and Marvin Hull, and they're asking to rezone it from R15 to R10. And I'll ask staff to provide a review.
Thank you, sir. As you mentioned, the Hoyles have requested that their property be rezoned. The parcel is located at 204, 206 West College. It's on the corner of Wellington and West College there. Currently, 2 duplexes sit on the property. One was burned about a year ago, and the other, I believe, has tenants in it. Yes, so they plan to, they'd like to rebuild 2 duplexes there is the preliminary plans that we've talked about. So in order to do that, they'd have to have this more dense zoning district, so going from R15 to R10. The request is in line with the future land use map, which shows this area as medium-density residential. Also, there's some parcels zoned R10 across West College, and then some Gardner-Webb dorms are not too far from there as well. I have the definitions for the 2 districts in your packet, but like I mentioned, this just allows sort of a more dense zoning district to put 2 duplexes on there. There are currently the 2 duplexes, but it's not zoned right for that, so at some point the zoning was changed and that became a nonconformity, but this would allow the use to sort of continue.
All right, board, does everybody understand that, what the request is? And just for clarification, staff, so R15 is a zoning district considered medium density, and would a typical use that's allowed in that district be like a single-family dwelling?
Yes, sir.
And then R10 is more, would allow that plus the more dense uses such as multifamily?
Correct.
Okay. So the petitioner's asking to go from that medium density to the more intense R10 district.
make a motion that we accept it. It's gonna be a nice area there and continue to develop that area.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Looks like the motion passes.
You gotta do yours.
Old school.
Yeah.
All right. So that motion passed. What will happen is that there will be a recommendation provided by staff to our town council. The meeting, the public hearing is set for when, Justin?
May 2nd? Yes. 6:30.
Second.
Yep.
All right, so our next item is a request to change the code, particularly along the highway corridor, so West College Avenue and South Main Street. And this is regarding to the architectural requirements
Yes, sir.
for non-residential uses. And I'll turn this item over to staff for review.
Thank you, sir. So the request before you is to change section 8.10 of the town's Unified Development Ordinance. The current that section applies to exterior building material standards. The wording is in your packets, but really those standards apply to any non-residential building within the downtown overlay district. And then they also apply to any non-residential building on North and South Main Street and East and West College, all the way out to the city limits. So there are more standards for the downtown overlay district, but these particular design standards apply to those corridors as you kind of come into town. The way it reads now, though, those standards also apply to any non-residential building in the B1, B2, or O and CS districts. Ms. Keely Jones has submitted this request. She owns property off of Michon Avenue, also owns Magnolia Mill, and is planning to build a permanent home for the business there. The request came about because she is back off of Main Street, or South Main Street, kind of behind the KFC Taco Bell there, yet still has to adhere to these standards that we have that apply to businesses on Main Street or East and West College. So in looking at the code, we could strike out the requirement for those standards to be applied to B1, B2, and OCNS. The majority of businesses in Boiling Springs are going to be on Main Street and College, or they're going to be within the downtown overlay district. So this would open up some additional space to have just lesser standards than those strict standards that we have for those sort of gateway corridors. Does that make sense? The only areas that staff could find that this would really affect is Michon Avenue, where her property is, and some other parcels exist. Ascot, which is out East College as you leave town, and Bethel Avenue, back where the Neal and Cole building is, kind of back off of Main Street. Outside of that, like I said, most of the businesses are going to be on those main corridors or within that downtown overlay district. So,
And I think all those buildings are metal framed buildings.
Which
Well, I mean, Ms. Jones, you're talking about doing like a post-metal frame building,
I originally was, and I'm also looking at party board.
okay? I think the buildings that are on Ascot, the buildings that are on Neal and Cole,
Yes,
for
sir.
Neal and Cole, they're all the same type, and they look fine.
yeah.
There's really nothing wrong with that, so
Rest assured, it will not just be a metal board.
it's hard to sell stuff out of a metal building.
So if this is amended as we have in draft form, the way I'm reading it, it looks like it's applied in the B1, B2, and the O and C districts, right?
Yes, sir.
That happen to be along those corridors. And if amended by striking out those zoning districts, are you now applying it along those corridors regardless of zoning?
Yes, sir. So,
So if you did that, would that now be adding parcels? Would additional parcels be required to be developed in this way as opposed to leaving it? And I'm just wanting to make sure, I'm just
I
wanting to make
understand.
sure we get the wording right so that we're achieving the intent.
yeah. So the way I read it is, the standards apply to all non-residential buildings in those districts, as well as other non-residential buildings located on 150, 1003, or 1161. So to me, any non-residential business on those routes are gonna be included into it. And this would
Okay, I
just
see.
remove those routes. Yeah, I think it's that.
I think the as well as,
As well
yes,
as, yeah.
okay, that explains that, okay. So I think, I mean, for me, when I read the language and then I look at what the request is, you know, the question that I had for Justin earlier was, what was the intent behind this ordinance? And I think the intent was to preserve some sort of character that they were after along those corridors. And so would the request still preserve the character and allow that more lenient, you know, the more lenient standards along those side roads, but still preserve that character? And I think it would. I think the intent was really along the corridors, along the lots facing the
We're not changing
road.
it from B1 or B2. She's still gonna have the same landscaping requirements that
Yes, sir.
B1 and B2 have.
Correct.
I don't see any problem with it.
This would only change the appearance or the architecture of the structure, right?
Yes, sir, yeah.
If there's no other comments, I can ask the petitioner if she has any other comments. Ms. Jones, do you have anything that you want to add?
My main concern was just, with the cost of, or in the ordinance, it states that 80% rock or, stone. And that's just not, it's just not feasible for a super small business like me. So I still plan to have a super nice building, just going about building it a different way.
Thank you. Any other discussion by the board?
I make a motion, we accept the text as written by staff.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion of the motions before we vote? No discussion, we can vote. All right, so the motion passes. And again, this would be a recommendation to council and, remind me of the date,
May 2nd,
May 2nd, first Tuesday in May.
that's right.
All right. So our last item is from staff, and they're want to bring the topic of recreational vehicles to our board and have a discussion. So I'll turn that over to staff.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if we've done this with this board before, but typically with council, when we have an item, I'll take it to them first to get some feedback before we, fully research something and then bring them a recommendation if it's not something that they're interested in or want to do. So I wanted to do something similar here where I bring you all a topic and get some feedback, and I'll do the same with council in May. And based on that feedback, we'll then decide to either leave it as it is or bring back a formal recommendation to kind of take through the process. So this is nothing formal, just kind of wanted some insight into what your thinking was. We currently don't really have any regulation around recreational vehicles. We do around recreational vehicle parks, but particularly people living in recreational vehicles on residential property is where this came about. So if you actually have property in the floodplain, we have some stricter regulations, but outside of the floodplain, we don't have any regulations, and so someone could live in a RV in somebody's backyard or on a parcel, a vacant parcel, and pretty much just be allowed to do that. We do have one regulation where we would require a separate dwelling unit to be separately metered and have a separate connection to the sewer system. Really, though, when you start digging into the state's definitions of dwelling units, a recreational vehicle is not really a dwelling unit. So we've made people disconnect from the system previously, but kind of we're getting into a gray area. So wanted to just kind of research this a little bit more. So really, if you have a house and you wanted to build a tiny house in the backyard, you pretty much can't do it. The requirements for zoning don't allow you to have multiple dwelling units unless you're in certain districts. In a typical, R10 or R20 district, you wouldn't be allowed to do that, though. The way the regulations are now, if you wanted to park an RV in your backyard and let somebody live in there, absolutely, you could pretty much do it. So wanted to get some thoughts on whether we should look at regulating that more, or I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. We have had a couple of instances where this has happened, but again, I don't know that it's going to be an epidemic of people living in RVs across the town. But don't have anything in place, so just wanted to get your thoughts on putting something in place.
We've had this conversation a lot at work, and I agree. I think the use of RVs has drastically increased over the last 5 or 10 years. Nowadays people are more willing to travel for work, so they'll buy an RV and they'll travel and live somewhere temporarily. You've got, I think, the fact that they're just a bigger hobby now. Families are buying them more and traveling for vacation. And then housing, I think, has caused an uptick in them as well. To buy a home, it's so expensive now. So people are looking for other methods of living. So I definitely see we're seeing in our office across the county as well, increase in use. And this is a topic that we've all had.
That reminds me to clarify. I know we have a number of folks in town that own RVs and have shelters to store their RVs, and our intent is not to disallow anything like that. It's the actual living with someone in a.
So is it not covered under the zoning, the R10, R15? I mean, you can't have multiple living. Are you saying that because RV is not spelled out in state definition, you can't count that?
Yeah, because we don't have a definition for it, and the state's definition is classifying it more as a vehicle. We
So
can't really.
wouldn't it be easier just to modify the zoning for those that specifically spells out, for town's purposes, an RV is considered a dwelling unit?
Yeah, and that may be one of the changes that we would just bring back, to just add the definition of that under a dwelling unit and cover it.
I mean, I'm an RV owner. I have it. COVID hit. We had to spend a little time out there because we needed to separate everybody.
Sure, yeah.
But I wouldn't want to live in it. It's nice, but about 7 days, kind of running out of space in there.
Well, and even in the flood damage prevention chapter, it talks about a cap of 180 days. So there's some leniency if you have a special circumstance or something.
And again, I do think the town, I do think we should be sensitive to people that buy a lot, want to build, but they early sell and they're stuck and they need a place to live while they build a house.
Sure.
I get that, but again, if we need to have some type of ramification, some time limit on it, so that they're just all of a sudden don't pitch a tent and say, I'm here.
Yeah, on the county side, it's those types of situations where we don't chase enforcement for that. And we have people that get building permits to build a house, and they'll let us know that, hey, I'm gonna be staying on site. We'll pull our camper there while we're, under construction. And as long as the home is under construction, we view it as a temporary use, and not a permanent home site.
So what have you done in the past? It says you've encountered several individuals living there. We just let it go, or what have we done?
One, in one instance, we've we were told that they were only gonna be there temporary, so we've just revisited until they
What they all
basically
say.
moved out, yeah. The other is, we've used they have to be connected to a separate connection. And I think the most recent instance that kind of brought this up again was they were connected to the house.
Yeah.
So we made them disconnect from the house, but we said we don't really have anything that says you can't live here, so.
Okay.
Does the county have any regulatory in place other than what you just said? I mean, is that supported somewhere in a plan or policy?
Specific for the use of RVs? No, I mean, we have a definition, and our definition copies the state's definition, which calls them how's it worded, Justin, to be used temporarily for recreational travel reasons. So we have that. We have a lot of, we don't have laws that says you can't have an RV, own one. We don't have a rule that says you can't have it on your own property, and we don't even have a rule that says you can't plug it up on your property. We have, I think if someone chooses to make it their principal residence, the county, we can try to enforce that rule of an RV being temporary at that point. And I'll admit, it's hard to enforce. It's, nobody admits that they're there permanently, number one,
Right.
like Justin said. They all have a plan to be, to build a house or to buy a house somewhere else or move. So none of them admit that they're gonna be there permanently. You've also gotta realize that enforcement of that rule and being strict with that rule can mean displacement of a family. We've ran into that before, so you gotta be sensitive to that. It's definitely to me, you got two things with RVs. You've got, what are the rules, so we all understand them? And then once you've established what the rules are, how do you enforce them? So it's two topics there with RVs.
I would say the simplest way to approach this would be through spelling it out in zoning, in your residential zoning. That just simply spells out, and you can't have an RV, or time, you can't have a house and an RV.
Yeah.
On the same lot, and then figure out how to word it back to, you get 365 days on a vacant lot to build. It's gonna take, in today's economy, it's gonna take a year to get a house built.
The problem with the building is your building permit can last forever as long as you're
As long as you're,
keeping inspections. As long as you have at least one inspection a year, a building permit stays alive.
but I wouldn't necessarily tie that to the building permit. I would tie it to a day, 365 days. If you're doing your due diligence, you should have your house done in 365 days. And then at that point, you can assess a fine every 30 days until it's done, and that kind of encourages him to get it on down the road, and let's get this thing resolved.
Sure.
Well, and if you do have a family living there or something, it gives them time to make other arrangements.
I will say from our experience, our problem's not been with people building houses. It's been with the people that are not building houses,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
that are just camping out in an RV behind mom and dad's house. Or on a vacant lot that they own. They pulled an RV and that they're just living there. And the neighbors are calling, wondering why they're living in an RV.
How mean, I think I'd like to see something more than what we have, but not cross the line of being too regulatory. I like the idea of wrapping it in zoning.
What are you guys looking for us, Justin, as far as comments or recommendation or
Just this,
discussion?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, and that's enough, if that's, you know, if there aren't any other comments, I mean, we can take that, and that's very helpful. But yeah, open to any other feedback.
Are you seeing a trend or an increase in use across town? Or is there, I guess, is there a problem?
I wouldn't say that there's a problem. I'd say we've noticed a few incidents in the last year or two. There've been, I can probably count 3 or 4, that have pretty much resolved themselves, all except for the one that's happened recently. So, yeah, but being that we've kind of consistently noticed it,
Okay.
we'll bring it up.
Well, I think I agree with the recommendation. Something just don't seem quite fair that you can't build a little small place back in your backyard for a mother, but you can go buy an RV and put it there and put them in it. That don't seem quite fair. But, but I don't have a big problem. Otherwise, I mean, I like the recommendation. We tie it in and give some time limit.
Okay.
Anything else from the board?
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, next item's adjournment. Any motions?
Motion that we adjourned.
Motion, yeah. Second.
We are adjourned.
We'll have to vote on it.
We moved through that a lot quicker than I thought we would.
I'll see you at the next one.
All right. Have a
Or
good
in a
one.
while, before then.
Yeah, come on over. We'll keep a light on for you.
That's it, that's it.
Yeah.
Down there in Westlake.
Oh, yeah.